So I'm talking about indie games today. You think maybe people talk about them too much? Nah, that's not possible. Let's have some fun! About 3 years ago, I made a list ranking my 10 favorite indie games at that time. The indie scene is full of so much fun and creativity, and it's always a blast to talk about indie games. I've played a bunch more since then, but instead of ranking them again, I think I just want to talk about them. Similar to 10 more favorite Wii games, I'll talk about some of my favorite indie games in no particular order that weren't in my previous list, but I'll still save my favorite of the bunch for last. So yeah, why don't we start off with a pretty peculiar one. If you recall from my favorite games of 2021 video, you might remember that I talked about a game called Moonlighter. As the name would suggest, this is about you as a shopkeep that moonlights as a dungeon explorer, because you gotta keep those shelves stocked to make a profit after all. The concept is pretty out there, but it's executed so well. Let's start with the shop part. You take whatever you find in the dungeons and put them up for sale to the townsfolk. When you're displaying items, you gotta put a price on them based on how much you think they're worth. When customers take a look, they'll give reactions, and you can use these to adjust prices accordingly. You gotta aim for that sweet spot, where customers want to buy them, but also that the price isn't so low so you can make some solid profits. Throughout the day, you'll see people of all kinds, from standard townsfolk, to heroes looking for equipment, and thieves that want to steal stuff. The nerve of some people! The money you make can be used for a bunch of stuff. You can upgrade your shop to allow for more shelves and staff to make things flow better, or you can upgrade the town itself. There are other vendors that'll sell things like potions and weapons, so upgrading their wares is a great idea too. And once night falls, you head into the dungeons. Since it's a roguelike, they're all randomly generated, so you never know what to expect. There are enemies to fight, treasures to find, and secrets to uncover. You have to keep your wits about you though, as if you fall, then you'll lose whatever you have on you, so you gotta pick when to bail out. These aren't meant to be beaten in one go, rather you gradually improve in order to make it to the end. Moonlighter is definitely an interesting and easy recommend for a chill game to play. Alright, we're off to a good start. Now let's see if I can't talk about another roguelike. Well, I tried and it failed. Let's talk about Colt of the Lamb. Last January, I began streaming on Twitch, follow me if you haven't, and the first game I played was this macabre roguelike. You're a lamb with a crown and powers, and you have a cult you gather. Okay, it's not that simple. First off, you explore these dungeon areas in order to fight demons and gather recruits for your cult. You're given a random weapon, such as a sword or bombs, and it's up to you to gather more stuff and just survive. Once you survive and make it back, you gotta tend to your cult. You're not a heartless monster after all. This is a bit like a small village, and you have to make sure everything is right. Everyone needs food to eat, a bed to sleep in, an outhouse to take care of business, and all other commodities. And for your efforts, you gain worship from your villagers, which you can use to upgrade yourself or get more stuff for your village. The cultists will also grow in age over time and may offer side quests. But the most important part is the sermons you hold as the head of the cult. You take the worship of the villagers and materials you've gathered and use them to perform extraordinary spells. They can affect the village, the dungeons, and more. If you're not overly squeamish, then I say, give this one a go. Okay, now I'm really gonna take a break from the roguelikes. Instead, let's talk about a game about music. Don't worry, I won't put you guys through my singing. Instead, let's talk about Wandersong. I was gifted this game by my friend Ren, and he said it's one of the most wholesome games he's ever played. And I 100% agree with this mentality. Of course, it doesn't start out that way. You're told the world is ending and that you need to learn a special song to save it. And with not much more than that info on your singing skills, you set off. You go across the land, meeting all sorts of people, and solving various puzzles. And everything can be solved with the power of song. Manipulating the environment, giving information, and even defending yourself if push comes to shove. What makes all this work is the charm of it all. All the people you meet have legitimate issues, and you really want to help them. The bard themselves helps a ton with this aspect, as they respond to these issues in a way that one playing this game likely would as well. But as you explore more areas and see more turmoil, they develop in a very natural way. Each chapter deals with a specific issue, and they're often conquered by the bard learning something about themselves and growing as a person. It's a wonderful and heartfelt experience I think anyone can enjoy. So you guys ever play a game you call weird? Like the concept itself is just out there and it realistically shouldn't work, but it somehow does? I have a game like that, and it's called Bug Snacks. My good friend Hoshi spoke very highly about this game, and that made me want to try it out last year. And yeah, weird is definitely how I'd describe it, but I mean that as a wholehearted compliment. You go off to Snacktooth Island to research the mysterious bug snacks and find an adventurer who went missing. And what are the bug snacks? They are living food and drinks, with googly eyes. And they're absolutely precious, I love them. There's such a great deal of variety done with such a simple idea, it makes them really memorable as creatures. Of course, capturing them is only part of the journey. There are a bunch of characters on the island with you, and you gotta help them out. See, there are a bunch of disagreements between them, and they all went out on their own. But by fulfilling their quest, they'll reconcile with the others and come back to town. What's more, they'll even offer side quests that allow you to dive deeper into their character quirks, which is really cool. Sure, most of these quests boil down to catch this snack and bring it back, but the way they're contextualized makes it all work. This game may be weird, but it's super fulfilling all the same. So you know that failure is bad, right? You don't want to fail because it feels bad. But what if you're encouraged to fail? Well, that sounds stupid, doesn't it? Yes, it is! But isn't stupid fun the best kind of fun? Henry certainly thinks so. Seriously, if you haven't experienced the legacy of Henry Stickman for yourself at this point, you've been seriously missing out. His adventures are all about how you can fail in the most elaborate and hilarious ways, and they provide some of the most fun I've ever had. Sure, these games aren't any more than point-and-click games that are just pick an option and laugh, but that's the brilliance of it. You don't need to think at all, and you can just turn your brain off and have fun with all these wild escapades. And each of the stories has their own hilarious setups that give so much variety to the failure. And given how pretty much every failure is funny in its own right, it makes you want to see them all! From serious bodily injury, to facepalm-worthy screw-ups, to stuff that just makes absolutely no sense, there are going to be a bunch of fails that you'll just want to see on repeat. If you want to have a hilarious time, especially with friends, then boot this game up and enjoy all the failure. Okay, this next one might be cheating a little bit. It was made by an independent studio, but they got their funding from Microsoft. It's kind of a gray area, I know, but I'm gonna include it, because you know what I haven't talked about in a long time? A Metroidvania. Those games are always some of my favorite games to play. Getting engrossed in the world where you're free to explore and finding upgrades that make exploring and combat even better, it's a gameplay loop that I can never get sick of. I talked about quite a few in my first indie games video, and now I'm gonna talk about a truly special one, Ori and the Will-o'-the-Wisps. This game is a sequel to Ori and the Blind Forest, a game praised to death for its beauty. This game takes that same beauty and, in my opinion at least, puts it into an overall better game. Blind Forest is really good, but Wisp makes a lot of notable improvements. For one thing, combat is a whole lot better. Instead of just using fireballs, you can instead wield a whole host of different weapons that each have their own uses. There's a standard sword for fast slashes, a hammer for big blows, a bow to keep a distance, and so much more. What's more, there's a wide array of spirit shards that each provide a passive benefit, so there's truly something for every playstyle. And all of these are brilliantly used in the world itself, as the enemies you'll fight and the puzzles you'll encounter are truly something special. And man, this game really knows how to nail the story and atmosphere. After the events of the first game, Ori and his adoptive mother gained a new family member and a baby owl named Ku. Ori and Ku loved one another, but were separated by a massive storm. Ori's motivation to save Ku is one I think anyone can connect with, and the game that ensues is one of the finest Metroidvanias you could ever experience. Okay, I think it's been long enough since I've talked about a roguelike, and this one's quite special. Do you like Man Bal Network? Well, so do the devs of One Step from Eden. Seriously, the idea of making a roguelike with this smooth as butter battle system is just absolutely ingenious. For those of you unfamiliar with how it works, well, first of all, shame on you, you really missed out. Secondly, you move on a grid system and you have a slew of attacks that are given to you in a random order. At any time, you have 2 active, and they cost a certain amount of mana to use. You can also use a basic attack, which will differ depending on the character you're using. And speaking of which, each character has a different starting deck and an alternate playstyle, so you can experiment to your heart's content. With how many different ways you can build a deck and use a character, the only thing limiting you is your own imagination. That's not to say this game is a breeze, quite the opposite in fact. The enemies really make you work for those wins, and the bosses against these characters are all tricky in how you fight them. All this together makes for easily one of my favorite roguelikes ever. Okay, there's one more roguelike I want to talk about, but I'll save it for later. In the meantime, I want to talk about a game I find cute. And really, that's the best way I can describe it. So now let's talk about Chory, A Colorful Tale. The premise here couldn't be simpler. All the color is gone, and you find a special paintbrush, so go color everything back. Yeah, it's a pretty simple idea for a story, but it gets surprisingly deep. It tackles issues such as depression and anxiety in a natural way. The protagonist has to take on a seemingly impossible task, and there are times where they doubt themselves. But thanks to the people around them, they know they can't give up when the going gets tough. What helps the story is the charm of it all. Not just the fact that all the characters are animals named after foods, but how everyone interacts with one another. You have your family wishing you well on the phone, strangers giving you hints and advice in the most wholesome way possible, and seeing everyone so happy when you manage to help them out. It's a brilliantly constructed world that just makes you want to smile. As for the gameplay, it's a bit like a Zelda game just without the combat. You traverse the land mostly trying to figure out how to advance and solving puzzles along the way, and the solution is always just to add some color. You can pull a Splatoon and write up walls with paint, go through tubes, bring things back to life, and so much more. It's such a fun way to explore, and a lot of these areas really force you to get creative. Dare I say, artistic. This game really is a work of art, and it shows that even in the bleakest of times, there's always color to bring the joy back. Okay, now I'm done being sappy, so let's move on to a more action-y game. And man, this game really blew me away. And without further ado, Crosscode. Seriously, this has become, in my eyes, a quintessential indie game experience. The way everything in this game comes together is truly amazing. The idea is that you're a player in an MMO, and you do the usual MMO things. You meet new friends, you take on quests, you talk with NPCs, and you beat up any monsters the game loads in. However, it's apparent right from the start that things aren't quite as they seem. There's something sinister under all this code, and you want to find it. That's all I'll say without diving into spoiler territory, so let me start gushing about what there is to love. Get ready, there's a lot! The story and characters are presented so well. Leia may be a silent protagonist, but she still managed to be not just a wonderful link for the player, but she's also so expressive. Especially her smug look. That face says so many things without a single word. And the gameplay loop can be downright addictive. The areas are so much fun to explore and the combat is so much fun. You start off simple with a melee attack and a ranged attack, but you're given so much freedom to build Leia how you want, to do things how you want. Between the elements you'll gain access to and the skill tree encouraging you to be yourself, you'll undoubtedly find the style that fits you. And the combat is only half the equation. Once you get into the dungeons, you have puzzles to solve. Similar to Chory, it's like a Zelda game, and as such, you have to use your noodle with how to go about solving the puzzle in front of you. And when you get to the bosses, they're all brilliantly designed and so much fun. Everything this game does is refined to the nth level, and if you haven't played it yet, then you've missed out on one of the all-time best indie games ever. Okay, I've talked about 9 indie games that I really like, but this last one transcends that. It's a game that absolutely wowed me from the first minute, and that feeling of awe has never left me even after so many hours. It's a hell of a great game, because it's Hades. Oh man, the way this game hooked me and never let go is unlike any game I've ever played. You're Zagreus, the son of Hades, and you want to escape from the underworld to see your dear mother on the surface. Unfortunately, Hades doesn't want any of that, so he does everything he can to slay you and send you back home. But of course, he can only try. With one of 6 weapons at his beck and call, Zag is perfectly capable of destroying just about anything in his way. And that's before you add in the help of the other Olympian gods. They're all at odds with Hades and want to help Zag in his efforts, so they grant all kinds of boons. From powering up attacks, to inflicting statuses, to protecting you, there's a boon for pretty much everything. And those weapons are all very different with pros and cons to each, as well as different aspects to them, so each run is going to be wildly different. And the way the game encourages you to improve is just brilliant. See, once you're in your run, you'll gain darkness that you can use on the mirror in Zag's room to improve specific attributes. And what's more, each aspect has 2 sides to it that you can swap between freely. So when you fail, and trust me, you'll fail a lot, it never feels like a major setback. You'll always have stuff you can enhance or change to vary up your approach, and that goes for the keepsakes too. Each one grants a passive benefit, and they all have their uses. And man, when you get to the bosses, you're in for some of the most fun a roguelike can provide. They're all frantic, difficult, and so much fun. Hades even got a sequel recently. Sure, it's only in early access as of right now, but the way they're handling it is pretty genius. It's not trying to one-up the first game, rather be different, while also similar. It has a new story focusing on the daughter of Hades, named Melanoi, and her fight against Kronos. The weapons are all new, and the progression system got an overhaul with the new Arcana system, which I honestly prefer a little bit. The way things are coming along, this game is also looking to be fantastic. But the way Hades 1 really got to me makes it by and far one of the best indie games I've ever played. Better than Dust though? Honestly, not quite. We haven't quite gotten an indie game that can top that one as my favorite, but I hope this video gives you an idea of the kinds of phenomenal games indie studios are making. I'm Arrow Dragon, and long live indie games! And that's a wrap for this video, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I know it wasn't a super deep video, but that's because I wanted to get a good video done before September. And that's because this September marks 10 years since I started on YouTube, and I want to do something special for the occasion. Be on the lookout next month for just that. Well, until next time, this is Arrow Dragon, signing off.